Now, Chad Sweet, a former Homeland Security and CIA official and co-founder of the Chertoff Group, and James Kallstrom, who's a former FBI assistant director in charge and former senior advisor to the government for counterterrorism. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here tonight. Jim, really? Workplace violence after that?
No way, Megan. You know, call it murder, but stop this workplace violence crap. I mean, that's really outrageous.
Why would they even come out with that initially? Well, why even categorize it at this point?
I can't blame the local police. I mean, that's really not their business, but just call it murder. Call it bloody murder.
Mm-hmm. Chad, is there some reason for doing that? I mean, I understand it happened at the workplace, but all this other stuff happened too, and now we're very well aware of it.
Yeah, I think, Megan, we saw this in the Fort Hood shooting, that this administration was afraid to call a spade quickly when the evidence was overwhelming. I do agree, though, with Jim that in this initial phase, the catalyst for the act appears to be somewhat related to his termination. And
sure. So, it certainly seems like he snapped upon being fired,
correct.
But that doesn't account for the true motivations leading to the anger and the disposition toward committing such a heinous act. I mean, in all of the workplace violence episodes we've covered, we've never seen somebody beheaded. This is the first American beheading on American soil, reportedly in the name of jihad. I mean, if you believe reports that he was shouting Arabic phrases prior to the murder.
Yeah, you know, the FBI will be looking at all this stuff, and they got to get into this mosque. They got to get into his internet. They got to get into all his associates, and they need to get into it fast.
Mm-hmm. They are investigating tonight. Will they have all of that run down? And you mentioned the associates, because when we saw what happened down at Fort Hood, again, classified as workplace violence, and we dug deeper, it did turn out that Hassan Nadal had connections to some very dangerous terrorists.
Oh, without question. You know, and that's why we need to be doing some of the things we're doing. The NSA thing, for instance, I don't want to belabor that, but I mean, these investigations need to take place, and the FBI needs to be very aggressive within the law to look into these things.
Chad, do you believe that these reports that he was trying to convert fellow employees, that if you look at the Facebook page, he condemns America spelled with a K, the Arabic phrases, his pictures of bin Laden, the picture of the beheading is the most gruesome thing I've seen in a long time, that he celebrates on his Facebook page by posting it. Is that enough to get the FBI involved, or would there have to be more?
No, this is sufficient. And if we look at, for example, as you mentioned, in Nadal Hassan, there was enough, obviously, at that point to dig. And what we saw, just like Jim said, when they do a search, we were able to learn quickly that Hassan was actually in contact with Anwar al-Awlaki, one of the top 3 leaders of al-Qaeda. So I think in this case, what it does highlight is what Jim said earlier, is at a time when I know there were a lot of frustrations over the NSA program, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is a moment, I can assure you, when a tool like the NSA metadata program would be critical in allowing the Bureau to have a quick ability to determine, for example, who is this individual called in the last 3 months. That's a critical question to find out what is the network. We saw in the Boston bombing case, rarely are these individuals radicalized solely over the internet. They usually have an enabler somewhere in the community.
Jim, this guy goes in there with a knife that he found in the workplace. The police described it as a regular-sized knife. They said something you would cut a head of lettuce with. He was shot down by a deputy sheriff on site. Who knows how bad this would have been if he had.
You know, thank God someone in that place had a gun. You know, a good American citizen had a gun. And I think we're going to find in the future that more and more people that are just whimsically against guns, or they say all these crazy things, they're going to hope that real good people have guns too, and it could protect them. Imagine if he didn't have a gun, how many more bodies we'd see in here.
Right. Last question, Chad. How on earth could a man like this with such a lengthy criminal history get hired in the first place? Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think that highlights the issue just generally, that in a world where we have the tools that can allow us to do these kinds of background checks, we have to begin to allow both employers and law enforcement to use those tools within the checks and balances of civil liberties. The last thing I would tell you, too, in closing, Megan, is in a moment like this, when I was at Homeland Security, there's no question that we should be outraged, and if in fact this ends up being a terrorist act, we should call it what it is. But at the same time, we need to be very careful and make sure that there isn't blowback against our fellow Muslim Americans who who are law-abiding, peace-loving. And this is a moment, to be clear, where we absolutely need their help to defeat this long war, which is the war of ideas.
It's going to take everyone. It's going to take everyone who is not a savage to stand up against this savagery. I got to go, gentlemen. Thank you both.